So welcome to the Tuesday meeting. Today I'm going to talk about Sam and Bud Walton a little bit, and it relates to an article I did with Grace Ann Roselle, who's here. And it was probably the toughest article we ever had reviewed. It's called Sam Walton's Ghost. And given it's Halloween, I thought it would be appropriate to talk about it. Now, I'm going to give you a little bit about what we did. We analyzed every annual report that Walmart ever did up to the time we published. And we also looked at how Sam Walton's leadership, and he died about 92, was treated by the corporate CEOs and by the protesters who protested about Walmart. And what we noticed was that each kind of new CEO put their own spin on Sam Walton after he died, and that they were saying things like, Sam would have done it this way, and I know he would appreciate my strategy, you know. And then the protesters would say, hey, Sam's rolling over in his grave because you're being so awful to suppliers, you know, forcing them out of business, and you're not paying your staff very well. The people there that greet you with a shopping cart, you know. And I wanted to give you a little vignette from the article. So Sam Walton was said to be very charismatic, and he was very miserly. In other words, he didn't pay people a lot. His very few staff members at the time. He also, when they wanted to do big IT systems, he shut them down. When they wanted to do big marketing programs, he shut them down. And he had a very personal touch of knowing everybody's name of every manager of every Walmart store across the country. After he died, they tried to pass the baton of leadership to Bud Walton. Bud was the brother, and they both had been in the military, and they co-founded Walmart. So Bud Walton was called upon to address the shareholders meeting, 15,000 people. And at the meeting, Bud took the podium and was imitating his brother on the stage in front of these thousands of shareholders. And Bud Walton joked and laughed and waved at the people. But then something happened. Bud Walton started to say that he would suggest that executives should take a pay cut and give the employees a lot more money than they're making now. Well, that was the last time Bud Walton ever appeared on this stage for the shareholders of Walmart. And so that's a little bit of introduction to what I'm talking about. So I want to share. It's good. All right. So I am Sam Walton's ghost. And I represent double voice discourse or double voice storytelling. And today I want to tell you what that is and talk about what it means to have many voices in your head. Some of us already know that. But then also what it represents when you're telling a story and then you are talking about somebody else, like the way that Bud would talk about his brother, or the new executives would say, Bud would have supported my approach here to expanding IT systems or something, or a new marketing program. So that's an example of double voice discourse, because you're using your own discourse to talk about somebody else's discourse. So this is all in the new book, Beyond the Echo Chamber, which is available at growthod.org till I get it published. And what we're doing here in this new book is combining the 5 pillars of GrowthOD and I'm doing a chapter each on the true storytelling. Oh, it didn't go forward? I'm sorry. I have to do it all over again, Grace Ann says. I won't put the slides up. I'll just tell you about it. So I didn't want to spend much time on that anyway. So I just want to give you an understanding that what we're doing in GrowthOD is revolutionary. It's a trend of multiple voiced org development approaches, and we'll take it from there. All right, why don't I stop getting some questions now? See if there's anybody that wants to say anything. So that's just a quick overview of OD. I'm sorry the slides didn't click. So Tom.
Yeah, thank you, Dave. Very interesting. I put a little note in the chat there that I used to go to Walmart a lot, and literally it looks like, I don't know if anyone's ever been there, but the corporate headquarters is like one of those old Army Quonset buildings, they used to call them, like a real, not what you would expect of a company that size. And throughout the building are signs, these posters on the wall that are about 2 feet by 4 feet that have a picture of Sam, and it's his voice coming out, and it says, Sam says, please put 10 cents in the coffee thing because you don't get free coffee. So when you go to coffee in the lobby where the vendors are waiting, you drop a dime in there to pay for the coffee. So the whole place is like that. And it's just really amazing. But I saw him one time when I lived in Chicago. He opened a new store there, and he would come literally to the store. He drove this old, I want to say it was about a 1953-ish pickup truck. It's in the Bentonville airport still, and showed up, and he would stand out at the door, and when people came in, he'd welcome them, and when they left, he'd say, is there anything I should add to the store? And that was part of how he became successful, was because he would ask the customers, what do you want me to carry? And when he first started, oh, I'm a hardware store. Okay, now I'm going to add food. I'm going to add this and that. So anyway, the rest is history, but an interesting guy.
Beautiful. Thank you very much for that insight. And that's the kind of material that Grace Ann and I studied for several years, and did the article that got published in a very fine dialogic journal. Grace Ann, do you want to say anything about that study, or are you trying to forget it? You have to unmute yourself, sweetheart.
Okay, I couldn't see the, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I couldn't see the tab before. Yeah, I think, good point, Tom, about how Sam's reputation was for paying attention to the customer and giving them the best price, doing the best for the customer. And what we saw, though, was that after Sam was gone, nobody talked about how do we go about doing the best for the customer. And the means to get there became skimping on everything else, all of the employees. I had a student in my class who worked for Walmart, and I think it was Walmart, and they had the motto, the customer first. And he said, the customer is not first, the dollar is first, and everybody else is somewhere after that. So what we studied was how people would pick and choose things that Sam said to create their story of what, the key to success, and to justify their interpretation, which is, not a new thing, but in our kind of research, it's called the double narrative. Is that what you're
Double
using?
voiced, yeah.
Double voiced, yeah.
So there were a lot of stories, because I worked at Kmart and when we would have the annual store managers meeting, we'd have 5,000 store managers show up, and we paid their airfare, and they stayed in a nice hotel and I got free meals and all that. When we brought some Walmart people in that had former Walmart store managers, they couldn't believe it because when they had their meeting, they had to take a bus or drive their car. They had to brown bag it because they got no food. And they were like astounded that we were like giving them these things. But that was the mindset, that they just were. And I remember I was called about going down there and working for them, and they met every Saturday morning as a manager. You had to spend 3 hours every Saturday morning sitting in this meeting. And I told my wife, look, Walmart wants me to come down there and interview, and I got to set the rules. And she said, if they give you a helicopter to fly from Michigan to Bentonville, go down there and interview. Otherwise, forget it. I'm not moving there. But the whole place is like a giant company town. The employees, the vendors, everyone there, all the houses are pretty much everything to do with Walmart. And it's a dry county where Walmart is, so employees can't drink anything like that. So they all drive across about 2 miles across the county line and stock up on the alcohol and bring it back. So it's really an interesting little place down there in Bentonville.
Very nice. I'm going to show a 7-minute clip here that I prepared for today. And
story about Walmart after your
go
clip,
ahead.
David.
Okay, right after the clip, you got
After your clip.
it. All right, so let me put this on screen. Are you seeing that screen that has the roadmap for today? Is it one story or many stories? As I'm going to show the video now.
Today, we're going to dive into a really fascinating idea called polyphonic storytelling. And trust me, it's a concept that might just change the way you think about every story you hear, every story you tell, and maybe most importantly, the story you're telling yourself. Let's get into it. So, I want to kick things off with a question for you. Is a story ever just one story? I mean, really think about it. We tend to think of stories as having one single clear voice, right? One perspective. But what if that's not the whole picture? What if every single story is actually a whole collection of different voices, all talking at once? So, here's our roadmap. We're going to break down what many voices even means. Then, we'll look at the problem with only hearing one. We'll see how this whole thing plays out in our daily conversations and even inside our own heads. And then, the grand finale, how to find that real, complex, multi-layered story within. All right, let's start with the big idea itself. One story, many voices. So, what on earth is polyphony anyway?
Well, the literary theorist Mikhail Bakhtin put it like this: a plurality of unmerged voices, a genuine polyphony of fully valid voices. Okay, I know, that sounds a little academic, so let's translate. It basically means a story isn't supposed to be one voice shouting down all the others. It's about letting multiple, totally distinct, and equally important voices all exist at the same time. The absolute best way to get this is to picture a choir, not a soloist. A soloist, that's one melody, one perspective, one story. But a choir, a choir is something else. It's rich, it's full of different harmonies and textures. No single voice is the song. The magic, the beauty, it comes from how they all sing together without just melting into one. That right there, that's a polyphonic story.
So, if a story can be this beautiful choir, what happens when we try and force it to be a soloist? Well, that's where we run into trouble. This is where stories, and the people in them, start to become objects.
There's a name for this, and it's called storied objectification. It's what happens when we take someone's complicated, messy, multi-voiced reality and just flatten it. We press it into this simple, predictable little box. Think about it, like when we label someone as the funny one or the smart one, and we completely ignore all the other contradictory parts of who they are. We literally turn a living, breathing story into a static object. We silence their choir. And you can see the difference so clearly here. On the left, that's the soloist story. It's the objectified version. It loves to use stereotypes, social, gender, economic traits to tell a simple, easy-to-digest story. But then on the right, you've got the choir. That's the polyphonic story. It's based on what makes a person unique. It makes room for all the complexity, the contradictions. It lets all those different unmerged voices coexist. Now, this isn't just some abstract idea. It actually shows up in how we talk to each other every single day, which brings us right to section 3, how we hear others. Because it turns out listening isn't just on or off, it's a whole spectrum.
This chart breaks down a few ways we interact with people's stories. For instance, narrating. You know when a friend tells you a dramatic story, and when you retell it, you subtly make yourself the hero who gave all the great advice? That's narrating. Shifting accent is even sneakier. It's like taking someone's sarcastic comment, "Oh, that's just great," and repeating it to someone else like it was a totally sincere, happy thought. Each one of these, if we're not careful, can flatten another person's story.
So what's the goal then? It's to get to something called internally dialogized ideas. All that really means is having the ability to hold someone else's story and their perspective in your mind right alongside your own without one of them having to win. You can hear both voices at the same time. That's real polyphonic listening. Okay, let's bring all this home. Let's look inward. Because this whole choir thing isn't just about other people's stories. It is absolutely happening inside your own head right now.
So, I'm going to ask you again, but this time, it's personal. What voices make up your inner choir? It's not just one, is it? We all have this incredibly complex, nonstop internal dialogue going on.
And here are just a few of the usual suspects. I bet you recognize the internal critic, that voice that's always ready to judge your every move. Or maybe the internal saboteur, the one that loves to whisper that you're going to fail right before you try something new. Then there's the story with a sideward glance. That's the voice that's constantly comparing you to other people, always wondering what they think. These aren't just random thoughts. They're distinct voices in our internal choir. And just recognizing them, well, that's the first step.
So all of this leads us to the final, most important part, finding your true story. How do we make that leap from being an objectified soloist story to being a living, breathing ensemble? Well, the path to polyphony really has 3 key steps. First, just start to recognize objectification. Start to notice when you're flattening a story, whether it's your own or someone else's. Second, you have to actively listen for those other voices. Ask yourself, okay, what perspective am I missing here? And finally, unleash your own inner choir. Acknowledge all those internal voices, the critic, the hopeful one, the saboteur, and let them all be heard without letting any single one of them take over the whole song.
So what happens when you do this? The result is pretty powerful. You start to move beyond a simple static identity, and you create what the source calls a new story of the self. It's a story that's richer, more authentic, more complex, and, ultimately a lot more true.
So I'll leave you with one last thought to carry with you. As you go about your day, listening to others and listening to yourself, just ask this one question. Whose voice does my story need to hear next? The answer to that? It might just be the start of a whole new chapter.
And I definitely intend to apply it. Walmart. In 2017, April, I was at the end of chemotherapy and radiation for cancer. And I got a message from my sorority that I had been selected as a Delta Sigma Theta author on tour. Now, before that, I applied, but in the application it said that your book had to be published in the United States. It couldn't be international. So I was like, they're not going to pick me for that reason, right? Well, they did pick me. And one of the tasks I had to complete was to do a Google search to put together information on me in the book so it could be sold by them and promoted. Come to find out, Walmart bought my book. And it was on their site. And I underestimated the number of books I was going to sell at the aquarium in Denver. That's where the event was. I contacted Walmart. We negotiated a price so they could make a profit and I could still make a profit. And I said, I think I'm going to need about 50 more books. So I just wanted to share that with all of you. This company is just, it was unbelievable. Here I am, a small business. I turned my dissertation into a book.
Good for you.
Yeah. So I just wanted to share that. I'll never forget that.
Well, thank you, Wanda. Thank you. So, so I did the film to give you an idea of the sort of single voice, single story thing of Sam, and then the more polyphonic thing we're doing now. Let's turn to Olivia.
Yeah, I want to ask and it's kind of in a different direction, but you having taken NLP, I'm thinking it might be fun to discuss here. And that is when we do double induction. So basically, we go through some sort of healing release process, and then what we learn to do, and it's so powerful, is have multiple voices speaking over each other, so that the left brain kind of has to go away to tolerate the chaos, but it all gets down deep, then embedded into our unconscious mind, which is the purpose of it.
Sure.
So, for example, if somebody's healed from maybe they've been through an intense several hour process, then you say you are making one person, well, several people can be saying this, but not exactly at the same time. You are making new neurological connections at the unconscious level. You are totally whole, totally healthy, whatever. So I'd love to know if that reflects polyphony or polyphony, and if it's a different way of looking at it.
Oh, absolutely. I had that process done to me with Genius Unlocked session,
Yeah.
level 3, and it was amazing. Right at the end of our coaching training, it was on the last day, I think, and it was just as you said, a bunch of trainers were shouting things at me, saying things. I couldn't concentrate on any of it, but my unconscious mind was kind of taking it all in, and it helped unify my new story of myself as a coach. So yeah, absolutely. So there's two kinds of polyphony. One, at an organizational level, all the voices like Sam Walton's voice, Bud Walton's voice, the new CEO's voice, the protesters. So you have all these different voices. A customer such as Wanda with her book, So that's a polyphonic activity. But if it gets subordinated and reduced to one voice, and you have to be dominated by one voice, then it's monologic. So yeah, two versions. When we have these internal voices in our head, I do. I mean, got a bunch of them. Wanda, I see your hand. Go for it.
Say polyphonic. As Olivia was talking, I was thinking about how I came to write the dissertation. And at that time, David had introduced us to Aristotle and catharsis. And I think there were ancestral voices. Because given the series of events and how I've arrived where I am now, there had to be ancestral intervention guiding me. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Could we use the ancestral voices as a form of polyphony?
It's a brilliant question, wonderful question. It fits well with Olivia's comment too, because when we were in that Genius Unlocked coaching thing, one of the things, and with Vanessa, her time travel thing, quantum time travel, one of the options is to go with ancestral voices. Another one is to go with voices from a prior life and get that all done. So yeah, absolutely. And appreciate it. So welcome, Doug, and welcome, Eddie. I'm going to shift into a little bit more scholarly look at this. And I know Eddie has to leave early, but he also has to get ready for the conference. And I wanted to give him a little bit of input that might help. So this is for you, if I can find it. Some PowerPoint. There it is. All right. Are you seeing this, Grace Ann? All right. All right. So when we look at Bakhtin's work, he did a study of polyphony. And I've talked about this before. And he examined all the authors that were looking at it at the time. And he came up with this notion of unmerged embodied discourse. Then what I'm doing is applying the purview, the glow, the seam, the souls, the AAM, We have some VuJaDé here today. So we also have axiogenix. So those pillars. And I'm looking at the true storytelling, which I've summarized as be true, make room, make spaces, etc. So you want to have polyphony there at the top. In the middle, you've got a very objectified discourse happening, turning people into objects, turning organizations into mechanistic machines, or economic bottom line, as was mentioned concerning Walmart's early days. Then you have three kinds of double voice discourses that are keeping the polyphony from happening. And I'm going to get into those. There's a unidirectional, multidirectional, then the hidden, unnoticed, kind of internalized dialogues we were just talking about. So let's just look at those three right now. Three levels. The upper circle was polyphonic storytelling. The middle was objectified, treating people and organizations as things rather than living stories. And then the kinds of double voiced storytelling. So Bakhtin calls it double voice discourse. Storytelling is an act within discourse. So I call it double voice storytelling, where you're telling your story through, but you're appropriating another's story to do it, and maybe not in a good way. So his definition of polyphony was exclusively towards its referential object. So whatever you're talking about, whatever storytelling you're doing, told with a plurality of unmerged voices and consciousness, a genuine polyphony of fully valid voices with equal rights to each other and its own worldhood. So that could be for a person or an organization. We tend to think of it as a choir, an organization, or an internalized choir that was in the movie. Secondly, objectified storytelling. Stories used predominantly gendered, racial, economic, political traits, personal traits, etc. And I know VuJaDé and axiogenix are not happy about this traits approach, and neither am I. And then it can be stored with the predominance of individually characteristic, determined traits or values, or organizationally objectified traits and values. So you have a spectrum of degrees of objectification, and you can become polyphonic, says Bakhtin, when you kind of objectify and get back to what Grace Ann Roselle, myself, and Claude called ensemble leadership. That's at the organizational level. Now, I want to focus on the three kinds of double voice storytelling. One is a unidirectional double, DVS, I'll call it for short. So you stylize another's story, you narrate the other story, you objectify it, or you unobjectify it, but it carries the teller's intention. So I might tell you a very dramatic story about Sam Walton, knowing everybody's name, standing at the door, as Tom was saying, and greeting people, asking what Walmart could do for them at the end of their visit. But I might turn that into my own direction and my own sort of styling of that story, and that's kind of an appropriation. But I can become polyphonic if I lean in that third column. Then the very directional, many directional stories, I can parody, satirize. Look at any late night comic show. You see a lot of parody, a lot of satirization, parodistic look at the person rather than who the person is or the organization. So you retell a discourse of a character, but you're representing them in a slanted way. You use their words, language, phrases, but you turn it in another direction. And again, there's a way out of that, says Bakhtin. And the third one, internalized dialogue, stuck story with living story, is what Grace Ann and I talk a lot about in the PERVIEW method, but I think GLOW also applies here, and exogenics, and the VuJaDé, to get more at the hidden internal polemics a person is experiencing, or an organization, if you gather up multiple responses. Polemically colored stories, any self-story with a sideward glance at someone else's authority. I mean, it could just be a raised eyebrow or an intonation or something to slant a story of another person's story. So, and then the internal critic, internal saboteur, internal ego of a self story that fits with the film, and it fits with what we learned in NLP that Olivia talked about. So we can become more polyphonic. In other words, any of those three, we can get toward a polyphonic direction. Now, parodically means an adverb, meaning the way that it imitates the style of a particular writer, artist, genre, with deliberate exaggeration for a comic effect. So it's an exaggerated approach. And again, you see that on late night TV. This is the total schema that I just went through altogether, seeing it all together. And this is a stylized neon lit image of it. It's the same material, but just showed it to you. But the point was, if we have these three kinds of double voice storytelling, if we have the internalized dialogue, number three, we can work in coaching and consulting to bring it back to, or bring it up to a polyphonic embodied voice. So I'll stop there. And let me see if Eddie's still there. Eddie had to go early, so we'll send him the tape. And then Sabine wanted the tape too. So I'll ask Doug Breckenridge, this idea that people have these character traits and then we collect a story of them and summarize their traits as a person. I know you guys are against that.
Yeah. That's, as you talk about, and some of my interest in this, in polyphony, is that we tend to stereotype or categorize people. And that was what, part of our motivation for what we created in VuJaDé. And so, as I think about it, what we try to do is break down those characterizations and those stereotypes that come in, because it's at that point, for me, the connection to polyphony here is I'm now ready to listen to multiple voices and honor and respect those multiple voices. The thing that struck me was what Olivia brought up and you expanded on, David, is the multiple voices in our head, because that was the question I was writing down right here. I have competing voices going on in my head all the time. Yeah. And just trying to keep all those, separate and respect all those and then there are voices going on that I don't even know. The subconscious is going on, talking to me as well. So yeah, this aligns really well with, the hard thing I find is where does a person become confident enough to be patient with this, to be patient with listening to the multiple voices?
Yeah.
Because, especially when we talk in corporate, there is no patience. You want the quick solution all the time. And it takes someone who is a little bit more mature in their approach to their organization, has respect for the organization. And sadly, in Silicon Valley, you rarely see that. So, the egos here just get in the way all the time. And I'm not just saying here, but that this is where I'm at.
Well, I think it's a big problem in organizations that it gets so monologic that you buy into a particular logic. I don't know, at the university, there'd be change agents coming in. We'd have to buy into the logic of each new chancellor, each new provost. Grace Ann, go ahead.
This reminds me of a couple of things I remember way back 30, 40 years ago, when people first started talking about paying attention to the customer and to the external part of the organization. And I said, which customer? And how do you pay attention? It's a complex multiple system out there. And just saying, oh, we're going to pay attention doesn't really give us much. So, and it's also to me the parallel with the emphasis used to be on combining things, summarizing and focusing in. And then it's kind of like the idea of assimilation of diversity. And now we feel like assimilation is you're losing much more than we want to lose. And we want to maintain that sense of individuality and diversity. The problem is, how do you do it? And I think there are a lot of ways that people take stabs at it. And my only conclusion at this point is, because I don't have like a magic way to do it. We like the conversational storytelling because it allows things to emerge and doesn't focus and limit and set priorities. And it just sort of a natural evolving. But I think what's important here is intention. I think if we at least acknowledge and recognize that we don't want to gloss over or oversimplify, that we want to be as open as we can to the complexity out there, is the only thing I can come up with that seems to always apply.
Well, two things, Grace Ann. One, and I'll get to you, Wanda, right away. First of all, your ensemble leadership is kind of a way in which multiple voices can gather together and have different identities of leaders and structures in a common organization. So you did that in the ensemble leadership paper. The second thing related is you took that into the CIW, Coalition of Immokalee Workers. And that's the one organization that I can find that exhibits this polyphony. Can you tell us a little bit about it, and then we'll go to Wanda?
Well, their motto, "We are all leaders," pretty much says it all, that our Western way of conceptualizing, and which we're kind of locked into with our language, that the leader is one. And so other people who've followed that kind of line of reasoning to look at that, there's an article called Leadership in the Plural, to try to reflect that different idea of leadership. And the Immokalee workers, actually, that's why we went there. I said, how are they doing this? I like the motto, but are they really applying it, and do they do that daily? And they do. It's a very unusual organization.
You're on mute, David.
I wanted to update you a little bit. Walmart and the CIW clashed. So as along with a lot of fast food places and supermarkets, et cetera, that buy tomatoes, vegetables.
What's the CAW?
A coalition of Immokalee workers there in Florida, or they started in Florida and they branched out up on the East Coast and then other parts of the US and then into Europe. So they have this polyphonic approach, and they want good conditions for the workers, a fair wage. They want water when they're working in the field, a place to get some shade, nothing outlandish. So Walmart was one of the corporations that agreed to abide by the polyphonic of CIW. It didn't mean Walmart changed everything, but they formed a contractual relationship that all of their fruits and vegetables would be free of modern day slavery. So by modern day slavery, I meant that the CIW organized because people were being clubbed and kidnapped and thrown into vans when they came into across the border and promised big jobs. And then they worked in a field and they were handcuffed at night and not fed very well. It's deplorable conditions. So over a period of 20 years, CIW fought against this and got the buy-ins of a lot of other people. But I wanted to say that Walmart is one of those that formed a relationship, a positive relationship. And why? Because they got a good reputational value out of it. Because it turns out that when you pay people a little bit more and you give them water while they work, they get a better productivity. I mean, it's not rocket science. Let's go to Wanda.
My thoughts were, and many of
Dr. Michael Harper, MD.
oh geez, well, I got a doctor's call.
Okay,
Go
you
to
take
somebody
the call.
else.
We'll come back to you.
I appreciate it.
Olivia, I think you were going to say something, but maybe
I had my hand up, and then when you got talking, I forgot what I was going to say. But what were you talking about just before this? Because it was about that. Like,
we're talking about corporations that could include lots of voices in what they do, and
oh,
not engage in
okay.
premature closure in their implementation of decisions and strategies. In other words, they actually get the input. Go ahead.
Now I remember, because you said something too, or maybe Grace Ann, you said something about, if the leader changes, then everything changes. So this is why I think sociocracy, and holacracy is a brand of sociocracy, is such a great leadership model. Kind of, I believe, the ensemble approach, where people aren't the president, they just show up in that role. And if it's a small company, they determine all the roles, and then it's possible that one person is playing two roles. One person could be the CEO and the accountant or the CFO or whatever, but it also allows for that agility for people to show up in different roles. And then they show up in service to this new energy that's created as that company and the combined energy of everybody in it. So it makes it a lot more stable. And I think that's a great way. I know the polyphony model really fits with that.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Let's go to Tom, and then we'll see how Wanda's doing.
Yeah, so I've, been in corporate marketing a long time, and particularly I've been, the voice of the customer, so to speak. So we did have voice of the customer programs where we actually would go out and meet customers. In 2 companies, we had a policy that the senior management people had to go and work in a store at least 3 times a year, so that they were in customer-facing roles where they actually interacted with customers. And it always amazed me that how far off the beam so many people in the executive boardroom, when you were sitting in there trying to run this place, were removed from the customer. And we initiated one time built this brand new store, and we were told by everyone in the management team, we will have the best prices. No one will beat these prices. And the guy that was the wine merchant got up and said, we've got this deal on wine that is untouchable. So they asked us to go to the store that weekend, went to the store with my wife, walking down the aisle, and she goes, are you telling me, Tom, these are the better prices than you've ever seen? And I go, yeah. She picks up a can of tuna, and she goes, I can buy this at Kroger for 25 cents less any day of the week. As we continue, I go, well, look, you like this red wine? This wine is untouchable. She goes, Costco's got it for $3 a bottle less every day of the week. So I had to go back, and then we were walking down another aisle, and the bread aisle, and I pick up this loaf of bread, and it's marked $10. And I go, $10? What the heck? This was before $10 bread existed like it does now, but back then it was, $2 for a loaf or whatever. So I bought this loaf of bread, and I took it into the meeting, and we had a meeting the next day. And they were going around the room asking how did everybody do, and they were all, oh man, this was great, and this is wonderful. And then they came to Tom, and I started with my $10 loaf of bread and said, I don't think this is a deal. there's clearly some marking problems with product marking. And I told that story about, the pricing really being bad. Well, that was met with a lot of merchants looking at me with daggers. They didn't want anyone saying that. So the voices are not always accepted, even when they're heard among the crowd. I'll say it that way, of the management team.
Thank you for that story. It's great. I just want to, it reminds me when Sam Walton was having everybody meet in Bentonville, that was a store manager, that level of communication and interaction would allow them to share the stories together, unless it was just Sam talking. And it's possible that they had something more customer driven early on. But in the recent days, if you see the same thing that happened to Sears and to Walmart, where they're bringing in these executives that had nothing to do with the company and taking them in all these different directions. Like I see Walmart now is banking. You can get eyeglasses, you can get all kinds of, like a pharmacy kind of thing going on there. And that's one of the things that happened to Sears. They got into so many different areas with each new CEO adding a new area that it became unwieldy. So we'll have to see what happens with Walmart. Let's turn to Wanda.
Thanks, guys. I'm going through a lot trying to find another endocrinologist. My endocrinologist passed away September 14th. That's what that was all about. Getting back to, hearing multiple voices and polyphony. And what is it? VuJaDé? That's what made me think about what I'm about to address. Where do we draw the line? Because I work with a colleague who's a clinical psychologist, and she deals with people that hear voices, right? So my question is, could VuJaDé, or even the concept of polyphony, if clinical psychologists are educated about it, is this something that could better help them service their customers instead of making an incorrect diagnosis?
That's a major question. I'm going to turn to Doug.
I'll be honest, I'm not so sure. I have to kind of reflect and think about, people who have multiple voices in their heads. I mean, we all do. So it's just, are you listening to all those multiple voices? And how do you characterize them? I mean, Western society, when you say that, Wanda would say, well, you're crazy, right? Is what they would say. But is it a good crazy or a bad crazy that you have going on? But from the point of view of psychologists, I know, just chatting with my therapist, when you're in a profession that tries to assist someone else, what VuJaDé does, in fact, I'll just bring this up right here. If David, well, I'm not sure if I can share. Let me see if I can.
All participants can share.
Yeah, let me just bring that up then. So I'm hoping you guys can see my screen. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger here. Are you now seeing my screen?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
So I'm
this is.
Can you send me your screensaver? Your trees.
Oh, the trees. Oh, that's just the Apple one right there. Yeah. So, yeah, that's in fact that's where I spent part of my weekend, walking through redwoods this past weekend. So it's really nice to kind of reconnect.
Sorry.
But right here, if I pull up myself, and let me pull up, I'm going to pull up Grace Ann here. So I really love her comments about the CIW and how she phrased it. It gave me a lot of visual creativity. But the issue here is, you look at this dot of this group of 14 people, and there's not, you could put us in quadrants, but there's not any that's the same. And as you start making the boxes smaller, as you see these are different levels of standard deviation for math. There's so many of us in different boxes. And so from a clinical point of view, or from a therapist point of view, or from a medical professional, what VuJaDé does is it helps to recognize that to really understand someone else, you have to align with them, at least on these constructs. And so if I extend that into polyphony, realizing and extend it even beyond VuJaDé, if I can align on these three constructs, the sensory, so kinesthetic, auditory, visual, the temperament, introvert, extrovert, realizing that if a person is an introvert, they may need more time to kind of form the thoughts, that those voices, are separate. They might be able to come in that, but how does it gel together into something later? Or the cognitive, are they talking about a process, or are they talking about a big picture? And how do those voices represent themselves in someone else's heads or someone else's story? When I can align to that and other traits that aren't part of VuJaDé, then I become much more authentic in representing that story and understanding that story and bringing all those threads together. So for us in VuJaDé, with our organization, what we see is this often becomes a catalyst. Because when you start talking about things that we typically stereotype or define people around, which is race, gender, all that, there's a lot of bias that comes in there. But when you say, well, you communicate with kinesthetically, auditory, visual, there's not as much bias. The general public doesn't have as much bias. And so that gives the opportunity for people to start to appreciate that differences are important. And obviously that's a founding building block into polyphony. If I can recognize that my story and your story is not better, even though it might be the same incident that happened, but I can honor and appreciate your story and build that choir. That's where it comes together with VuJaDé. And aligning to that means you truly honor and understand, or at least to the best of your ability, try to understand it. I'm never going to understand David, because he's way out there on the extroversion. And I don't attempt to. I just realize that it's different, and I'll be patient with him to actually see that difference. I do that with Monty all the time. This is Monty down here, my business partner. And he'll start talking, and it's like, once again, before it used to be, what the heck are you talking about? I mean, you're not even talking about the same subject, Monty, but, the patience I've learned with him is he is talking about it. He just sees it from a completely different perspective, and allowing that story to develop, giving that the space for that to happen, makes us that much stronger as an organization. So, to David's point and to Grace Ann's point about allowing polyphony to have the space to grow as you hear these stories is vital. It's most people don't have the patience for it. And so I've been struggling here thinking about how do we get people to learn that patience? You can say, oh yeah, this sounds good, but to put it into practice and have it, particularly an organization that is on quarterly results and deadlines and monthly sales figures, it's hard, and it takes some real executive space or some executive purpose to reward those kinds of behaviors. And so that's kind of what I've been noodling while we've been chatting here. I don't know if that answers your question, Wanda, but that's a perspective there for what VuJaDé allows you to do. That alignment's really important to appreciate another person.
I'm going to share this with my colleague, Dr. Sharon Huff. She's now in private practice. She got severance from Diversis Health unexpectedly after she passed the LPC exam. So I'm kind of trying to help her get set up in her private practice, because she's just like a genius. I say, you can do this, right? So I'm definitely going to share this perspective with her. And I'm trying to get her, she's laid up now with knee surgery, but I'm trying to get her to attend.
Well, that would be wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Wanda. Livia, and then I want to turn to Eddie.
So I had a comment, and then what you were just sharing, Doug, made me think of something else, which is that the used to be, from my research, that companies didn't like to try new things because maybe there were real costs involved. But now with technology, you can test things and it really doesn't cost you anything but time. And so there are tech companies that say, we want to hear your ideas. We want a 99% failure rate because that one idea that makes it through will make us billions, right? So it's very interesting how multiple voices are encouraged more in certain types of industries. The other comment I wanted to make was on the earlier discussion where we have multiple voices in our head. And based on my research and basically that and training, we all have that. And where it becomes a pathology is when they don't know about each other. So people who get traumatized, and this is actually a tactic, believe it or not, with some bad people, they'll split people. So I don't know if it was in this group or another, we were talking about people with multiple personalities that have real issues is sometimes because some know about others if there's many, but I think as long as we're aware and we have that awareness, this is that part of me that wants me to do this, but I know I shouldn't, but we at least know it's happening. Where it gets really dangerous is when it takes over and the rest of us in here doesn't know what's going on. I hope.
Thank you very much, Olivia. I'm going to turn to Edward Corville now. I'll give you some setup, Edward. He's going to be doing a presentation outside Dallas for the formal axiology people. They have the Journal of Formal Axiology, and I'm on his dissertation committee. I'm very happy. So is Grace Ann and Anton, that you may know. And he's going to be presenting because I'm here in rehab with Grace Ann, and I couldn't go, so he stepped forward. But one of the questions I've got for you, or if I could get some comments from you. So with axiology is about values. And my sense of polyphony is everybody's got different values. Some will overlap, yes. And so you're dealing with an organization with many different values. And then they go into axiogenics, leadership training, for example. And one would expect some value shifts to go on, perhaps. But it comes to the question of what can I do as a person or as an organization that has the best net value outcomes? Do you see any relationship between kinds of things we were talking about today and axiogenics is my question.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack here, not only within myself, but as I'm hearing from everyone else, and the emergence of polyphony as it relates to my own dissertation work, and this idea of voice. And I'm just going to back up to differentiate between values and value. And I'll answer that directly, is that there is a huge difference between values. Let's just say, for example, an organization wants to maintain the value of openness in their culture or transparency. Value, to differentiate the difference between, from a formal axiological perspective, the science of value is about how we, as human beings, place value on something, like an individual, or a physical object, like a chair, or in formal axiology, what we call the systemic, an idea or a rule. And formal axiology and Robert S. Hartman's work, and I want to try and make this accessible and so that it resonates with everyone, because I've had the privilege to be able to dive deep into this for the past 7-8 years of my life. And it's very complex. It's not complicated. Hartman made the proposition that in nature, there is a hierarchy, a natural structure of value. And it's this simple: intrinsic, extrinsic, and systemic. The intrinsic, think of a human being, has infinite attributes, okay, and has intrinsic value. Extrinsically, we'll just say, we'll use the idea of a chair, or the physical chair has a function. It serves an extrinsic purpose. And then he talked about the systemic dimension, the things that we think about, like values, rules, ideas. So to answer David's question, we have to differentiate what we mean between values and value, okay? And then how do we practically and pragmatically take what Hartman is proposing around theory, what I am referring to in my dissertation work as the nature of value, and the nurture? How do we apply it in practical and pragmatic ways in organization? And how do we maintain that structure of value in its application and the integrity of that through our duty to act in congruence with the hierarchy of value? I am proposing a theory of self, around being, doing, and thinking. And how does the self show up at work, okay, in relation to this hierarchy of value? And through that relationship, through polyphony, stories, through Antenarratives, through Tomorrowland, we relationally engage in storytelling. And when we are where we operationalize being, doing, and thinking when it relates to the self, it's really this simple. I feel safe to be a human being, so I have safety in my extrinsic value when I show up in the workplace. Extrinsically, I'm seen in the work that I do and valued for the things that I provide through my skills, my knowledge, my abilities, my competencies. And then from a polyphonic standpoint, my proposal is that the voices that exist in an organization must be heard. Not just one voice. So when we are safe, seen, and heard in the workplace, and this is what I'm proposing, okay, we have the ability to create value across all those dimensions of value in the intrinsic, the extrinsic, and the systemic, for the self and the other. And it's entangled. We cannot be actualized, self-actualized, axiologically actualized without the other. And that is the relational process that occurs through storytelling. That's what I'm getting from what Dr. Boje and Grace Ann have spent their life on, and I am the benefactor of being able to synthesize in its simplest way how this manifests itself, not only in work, but in life, okay, and in society, in our community. So that's probably way more than what you were looking for. I have notes sitting all over the place. It's a constant evolution that I keep adding to my dissertation work, and the ideas that David and Grace Ann have allowed me to play with in a space that let me be a deep thinker and allowed me to be Eddie and unique. And there's a contribution there. And that's where I am right now, and I'll stop there.
Well, now we got a lot of questions, Eddie. So first of all, I want to thank you for being Eddie. And the progress you've made, I think, is amazing. And before I get to Amin, I'm going to ask Grace Ann to respond if she's still there. Are you still there,
I'm
Grace Ann?
here.
Yeah, what do you think? and then we'll get to Amin. You have to unmute yourself, Grace Sandra. We can't hear you.
That was beautiful, Eddie. It's coming together.
In my head, yes. I have to write it all down. Thank you, Grace Ann.
Take the transcript of what you just said and write that down, baby, because that was gold. That was solid gold. Solid gold.
Amin?
Go ahead, Amin.
Yes, I never worked really in organization as I was entrepreneur, and the only things I was working with small company. But the only things I believe, the problem it is what when we talk about intra-set motivation and things like that about the people and about polyphony and things like that, it is to hear the people voice. How to hear the people voice? That it is all about leadership. The people have to be, I don't know, I'm asking a question, in environment where a team, like Simon Sinek said, a team is not a people who work together, but people who trust each other. But when there is not a trust in our big organization or things like that, how you can, we talk about voice, polyphony, how you can bring all that, how you're going to be heard. That is the problem, because still people, I believe, confuse what is leadership. People still think because they're going to making an MBA or going to the school, they come with a diploma of leadership, they will become a leader, you know what I mean? But as soon as they did not understand that it is all about human being, and maybe about open-mindedness. What do you think, Edward? And everyone, of course.
Go ahead, Eddie.
Yeah, so it requires a level of prudence, wisdom in the moment as an individual, self-aware, and understanding the dynamics that occur in any organization of power, politics, policy, past, right? The history that is driving the current state of the organization, and the level of transparency, okay, that exists in the organization, whether it's profit or nonprofit. You have to engage your wisdom to understand, well, you don't want to be the person that falls on their own sword. You want to live to fight another day. And the reality is that we're, with that level of awareness, as we gain insight into ourselves and how we operate in the world, well, we have to be able to engage where and when and how we voice, we act, and we are, right? So it is a delicate dance, and we have to create the conditions for being safe, seen, and heard. And are organizations willing to do that? Are they willing to shift? Okay. And individuals collectively have to pull together. If that's what they want, there's more power in numbers in that sense. So a collective voice, a polyphony, if you will, representing, and I will say this, not lightly, a revolutionary act against the disvaluation of human beings, a disvaluation of the work they do, and a disvaluation of the ideas that can be generated and used to improve quality of life across all those dimensions.
Very good. Amin, does that answer your question?
Yeah, but it did not avoid some people making a burnout. Anyway?
Say that again. I mean, I didn't understand that.
I said it did not avoid that some people, even about what you talk, they still making burnout in organization.
Burnout, yes, and moral injury in the healthcare industry, and people that are in the military that come back traumatized. Yes. So how do we navigate that? And I will say that a level of awareness brings great responsibility.
Okay.
Thank you.
And Doug, it's your turn.
Well, I was just going to build a little bit on what Amin and Edward or Eddie had said, which is, Eddie, you talked about being safe, seen, and heard, and with a means comments, how do you get that transformation, that change to happen? To me, it's listening. That safety areas is you have to have a culture of willing to listen. And that doesn't really happen in transactional cultures, which is what a lot of organizations are. It's all about getting my point across, not listening to someone else's point. And so to me, listening and making that part of that safe space is the first key. And it starts at the top. And usually the executives don't listen.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the moment they start actually demonstrating that they will listen and be able to, represent that voice. Amazingly, everyone gets more engaged, and other people start to listen more too. So, when you talk about organizations that are very transactional, it's because that executive doesn't have that time, and that's not a habit you can practice just by going down. To Tom's point, just even though that's a good step, go down to the front line three times a year. You need to be doing that all the time.
Yes, it's a way of being, doing, and thinking.
Yeah,
and it's everyone's responsibility, and it's okay to be transactional. It comes down to the level of transparency around what they're trying to achieve. What's the purpose? What's the purpose of the organization? What's the purpose of your product? What's the purpose of your service, etc. And a level of transparency so that as a workforce, you can be aware and educated about the choice you're making to engage in the work with an organization.
Yeah, I had at least with the younger generations, I have some hope. And the reason I say that is because as I've watched, as I've been back in the United States for over 10 years now, for more than a decade, one thing I've observed is people seem to become more transactional. That's anecdotal. That's just my impression of that. And I've got to the point of almost being concerned do we actually know how to be really personal? Do we know how to have relationships? And I have biases because I lived in Asia for over 20 years. So I have multiple understandings of what a relationship means. But at least with the younger generation, I see the pushback. I don't necessarily see the change coming, but I do see the pushback that there's more to life than just the bottom line, making the money. And for me, I hope that continues. So I think there is an opportunity here for all of us to shape, our children's future. So just a quick thought.
I share in that hope and that optimism as well.
Well, I've got an optimism. We're going to end on time. So I want to thank everybody for showing up here today and the feedback and listening to the presentation on polyphony has been very helpful. And I want to turn to Grace Ann, who I'm very grateful for. Grace Ann, we're going to do our gratitude and last comment and head on out of here. When you your button, Grace Ann.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I'm thinking of Russian and Paul, that we're talking about different languages. And if you didn't know that there were different languages, you would think it was gibberish. So, the whole idea that these are different ways of conceptualizing the complexity that we experience in life. And some people don't even know that there's the potential for that different way. So I think, we're just getting into it to try to figure out how to express it and how to appreciate it and how to be more sensitive and aware and use those things. When I went to college, I discovered that there's a different way to fold a bath towel in a linen closet. Before I went to college, I thought there's only one way, the way I grew up doing it, the way my mother did it. It never dawned on me that you could do it a different way. And to me, that's what some of these things are, that things that people don't, it's never dawned on people that there's another way of experiencing the world and looking at things. And so I think we're trying to delineate the dimensions of a different way of incorporating multiple voices.
Well, thank you, Grace Ann. You want to, let's go to Paul. And then, Paul, you've been silent this whole time. So what's going on with you?
I always have an awful lot to say, but trying to make it coherent can be difficult. When Grace mentioned Russian and polyphony, when I was an undergraduate in my freshman year, I wound up in one year studying simultaneously French, German, Russian, and Greek because I was good at doing that. And that was in 1961. A lot of years passed. And later in life, I decided I wanted to change my occupation and get a really highly paid job as a interpreter working at the UN in New York or in Brussels or in Switzerland. Those are the places that you can go to do that. And on the way, which I didn't get to, I was introduced to something called simultaneous interpretation. Oh, what's that? That is when a speaker of language 2 is speaking. And I am, as that person speaks, translating on the fly what that person is saying. So I have to listen and talk at the same time. It is an unbelievable feat to do that. And I proved it was overwhelming for me. I realized, if I want to get a job at the UN in New York, I'm going to have to not only have Russian in my head, I'm going to have German and maybe French, because interpreters who work at the UN are at least trilingual. And of course, anyhow, the point is about polyphony, multiple voices in your head. And Eddie, thank you. My God, wow. The ability to navigate and hold on to multiple threads of whatever's in your head. And Doug, when you talk about all the voices, this has really been instructive for me because it's simply, here we are again, as in olden days, trying to figure out everything and trying to figure out everything on the fly. The coalition of Immokalee workers, rooted in my head. I have one question to ask you, and we're running over time. And the question is, the coalition of Immokalee workers is a good example of ensemble leadership. Is there a U.S. corporation? And this is something where I'm completely ignorant. I often hear about companies that it's good to work for. What is any company now on the scene, anywhere, Fortune 500, I don't know, in the neighborhood, where ensemble leadership, where this whole thing works? Can anybody help me with that? An example would be, I'm going to shut up.
Not a specific company, but there's a whole field of cooperatives, organizations that are called cooperatives, and they explore, they're all pretty much experimenting with that kind of.
And Arizmendi, do you know Arizmendi? Anybody here know who Arizmendi is? It's the name of a bread store in San Francisco and Oakland. And it is a worker co-op sort of thing. And Arizmendi is a name taken by the bakery as their brand name, but Arizmendi is also the name of, I think, maybe a Jesuit priest in Spain whose idea about how you can have a socialist hyphen capitalist world.
Yeah.
I need to go back there and look it up. I pursued it some years ago, and the idea of cooperative. Anyhow, we're way over time.
We are. Let's
Thank
go to
you.
Wanda. Wanda.
I'm thinking about this concept of objectivity, along with how different theorists like Bakhtin interpret polyphony. And there is a lot here to be applied. I thought back on how I was able to achieve full faculty rank as an adjunct professor, and the impact was a story that I told. But getting to the point, I think one of the key factors is, and I'm going to talk about this tomorrow at the Speaking Academy, you got to get out of your community. You know, I'm from a culture where there's a lot of clannish behavior. Had I not gotten out of my community and attended a Latino Chamber of Commerce luncheon, I would have never connected with a student who withdrew from my class, not because of something I did, but because she was dealing with alcoholism. Okay, so I got a chance to connect with her, sit down with her, talk to her. How can I help you? She came back next semester. She also had 23 employees, high achiever, project manager, overwhelmed, juggling multiple priorities. So that's kind of what I'm getting from the different perspectives here. You can't just stay in your own little cocoon. Okay, so aho, and I'll turn it over to Doug.
Thanks, Wanda. Paul, I always appreciate your questions. They're always penetrating. So, you know, as you talked about, is there any U.S. company here? I literally can't think of one that does ensemble leadership. The closest thing I can get to is you know, the 90s Chicago Bulls. I mean, there were multiple people that played on the team. Basketball, to me, more than football or baseball, but basketball requires an ensemble if you want to really be successful. And I'll leave just with the next question, which is, you know, in that polyphony, basketball is 5 people on the court at one time. How do you scale? How do you make sure all the voices in a company of 125,000 people can be heard and represented? That's not the million, billion. Let's go with trillion. I guess Elon's on his way halfway to $1 trillion trillionaire now. So let's go with the $1 trillion question here of how you scale that. And so that's a nice question to kind of let sit and rest and live in for a little while. Maybe we've got our next app coming up here. How do we scale that?
Can I make a quick comment?
Yeah, please.
So I was at a dissertation committee, and this woman's company, on the hallways, they posted people's pictures and their story. So I think we have to look at different mediums too. Agree.
I mean, that's the first thing to honor, you know, respecting and honoring another person, understanding a little bit of their story, where they're coming from. Not getting stuck in that though, because realizing we all evolve, but that's certainly a great basis and a starting point. Yeah, who hasn't gone yet? Olivia, please.
Thank you. Well, I really enjoyed today. I guess this is just final comments. I do have something silly, if you'll bear with me. When Doug was saying about our children's children, does anybody remember the old Saturday Night Live? They had a guy named Jack Handy, and he would make these stupid statements that seemed logical but were ridiculous. I remember him saying, We need to leave the world a better place for our children, but we shouldn't leave the world a better place for our children's children, because our children shouldn't be having sex. Anyway, I'll leave it at that and pass it to Tom.
I am grateful for the voices that I heard today, the polyphony of voices that we have in this group, and how the wisdom and intelligence and just information always flows so freely here. So I'm very grateful for that. And David, for the wonderful session you led today. Thank you. Amen, did you go?
So thank you very much for everything. So I'm going to yesterday I watched something with my kids, okay, and I will finish it. It's called, I know you know it, The Little Prince. The Little Prince from Antoine Saint-Exupéry, that maybe you know. He said, and now here is my secret, a very simple secret. It is only with the heart that one can see rightly. What it is essential, it is invisible to the eye. It is what I wanted to say. I thought that is so wonderful what he said. And the life should be like that, actually. Everyone should be acting like that. Thank you. So I'm going to pass to Paul already. Wanda, you do it now?
I went already.
Yes, so, okay.
But thank
Edward.
It's Edward's turn. Edward's turn.
Yes, Edward. Thank you.
Listening is an act of love, and we can scale it in every interaction we have in relation to each other in every moment, period.
That's beautiful. Well, thank you all. Thank you all. The new book, I put the website where you can download the book for free. It's all about polyphony. It's got cases from a lot of work that Grace Ann and I have done, Walmart, the CIW, bunches of them, my office supply consulting, etc. So I'm trying to put a case with each true storytelling principle. It's in draft mode, so I appreciate any comments or ideas. So that's growthod.org, and you click on tools.
What was the title? What was the title?
The title is Beyond the Echo Chamber.
Thank you.
Yeah. And really appreciate all of you today. Thank you very much. And I think we're an ensemble right here. So, and we take turns presenting, and we have good dialogue. That's all that we can do. So thank you much. I'm going to turn off the recording and say goodbye.